Hey everyone, this is David Brown, and today I decided to check out a new spot for me, which was the Broken Tip Ski Trail of the Tiadaghton State Forest. So we're in north central Pennsylvania, just south of Williamsport. Here we see Route 15 coming down, and actually I parked just off of Route 15. There's a little picnic area where Skyline Drive meets Route 15. I parked there, and it's about a 0.7 mile walk up Skyline Drive to where the old Tower Trail crosses. You go up there, you gain some elevation, you hit a switchback, and that takes you up to the Broken Tip Ski Trail, which I walked in the clockwise direction. It's about a 2.6 mile loop. Once I completed the loop, I came back down the old Tower Trail and then back Skyline Drive to my car. Overall, the hike was about 5.5 miles, and it took me over 3 hours to do. I got started just after 6 a.m. Here's the view from the parking area, and you can see that the gate for Skyline Drive is closed. They do open it in the fall and into the winter for hunting season, but the rest of the year the gate is closed, which means you have to walk in, but it also means there's not a lot of cars passing you. Perhaps you saw my last video where I talked about walking the entire 5.8 miles of Skyline Drive, and this was the end of that walk. But this little section here this morning, I did have both Acadian flycatcher as well as worm-eating warbler, so two of the good target species for this location. On the left here we see Skyline Drive. This is the direction that I came from, and then we see the beginning of the old Tower Trail, and we see that it's blazed in red. We see the double red there indicating a change in direction. And the photo makes it look fairly bright, but really in person, as I started to go in, since there were trees overhead, it really seemed quite dark, and I was a little hesitant to go up at all, but I figured the day would get brighter and headed on up into the unknown. There's a lot of mountain laurel in this area, and in fact, DCNR just had a mountain laurel walk here a few days ago, which is one of the things that put this location on my radar. And the area is quite rocky as well, which I think gives it that Pennsylvania look. This is a cell phone shot that zoomed in a little bit, but I like having an American chestnut on the left. And again, I talked about those in my last video, that these are quite a rare tree that don't grow to a large size anymore because of the chestnut blight. And on the right, we have it with some mountain laurel. And I like that the trail is covered in leaves. It gives it a nice contrast between that fall look of the trail versus the green of summer and everything else. Here's another photo I took just to show off some rocks. Nice rock pile here. You can see striped maple. You got some fern here. You can see some mountain laurel in the top right. So just a typical Pennsylvania look. Here's another look at some mountain laurel. You can see the flowers that have opened as well as some that have not opened yet. At this point, I saw some white-tailed deer running away, but really that was the only big animal I saw on the entire walk. You can see here that it's blazed in the double red because this is the switchback, so you turn directions. And continuing on up, it still stayed pretty rocky. This hemlock tree was growing right next to the path, and if you look, you see all of this white stuff, and that's from the hemlock woolly adelgid, which is an invasive pest. It's like an insect, and these are signs that it's affecting the tree. Here we see some more rocks, and we see some striped maple, which is very common to see them extremely small like this with these giant leaves down low. Very common along the side of the paths. And there was a lot of mountain laurel in bloom on both sides of the path. And this photo here shows how extensive it could be. You can see it's not only close to the path here, but it extends pretty much as far as you can see into the background. This plant caught my eye, and I put it into iNaturalist and was told that it is Indian cucumber root. Here we have the end of the old Tower Trail and the beginning of the Broken Tip Trail loop. So I went to the left here and then did the loop clockwise and ended up coming back out here at the end. And here's the sign indicating that, and you can see that at this point we're 1.4 miles into the hike. As I started on the trail, there was a section that was a little bit more open, a little bit more sunlight reaching the ground. And at this point, we were at pretty high elevation. Looking at the map, it says around 1,920 feet. And in this area, the mountain maxes out around 2,000 feet. While looking at the mountain laurel, this caught my eye, where the flowers were a bit smaller and are this pinkish purple color. And I used iNaturalist and found out that this is actually something different called sheep laurel. So that was one of my exciting things that I learned today, was just discovering this new plant that I had no idea existed. And here's what the sheep laurel leaves look like, and you can see the flowers down below here. And here we have more mountain laurel. So on the mountain laurel, the flowers are bigger than on the sheep laurel. And mountain laurel is usually white. Some of them are more pinkish or purple though as well. There's some variation. And I was happy to find this American chestnut right along this trail. And I got some good looks at the leaves. And the scientific name is Castanea dentata. So you can think of like dentist, dental, big teeth. So we definitely see those teeth here on the leaves. And one reason I really wanted to hike this trail was looking at the map, this location was marked Hawkwatch. And someone many years ago, when we had been hawkwatching at the Route 15 overlook, had mentioned this spot and even invited to take me up here and show me. But since I didn't want to leave the spot that day, I never made it up here. So I was glad to finally get up here and see that it does look like a great spot for hawkwatching. I can imagine a good northerly wind in November, big golden eagle and red-tailed hawk flight. The raptors would be coming right along the mountain here and jumping across towards you. And it would be interesting to see if they actually come overhead here, or if they would cut down more this way or go the other way. So I'm really hoping that I get the opportunity sometime to spend a day with good winds hawkwatching from this spot. Being early in the morning, there were no hawks, but there were 2 great blue herons that flew over. And there was also some more sheep laurel. I wanted to hang out there longer, but I knew that rain was moving in, and I still had many miles to hike, so I kept on moving. And as I hiked, it was interesting to note the change in habitat. Some areas didn't have much ground cover at all, such as this spot. I really liked the pattern of the bark on this pitch pine tree. And this tree was quite large, so this is the best I could do to get a photo of the needles and the cones. Here's an area where we still see some scattered mountain laurel, but we also see some ferns and other ground cover. And similar at this spot. I've really been putting a lot of effort into trying to learn to identify more trees and other plants as well, so that when I'm moving between different habitats, I'm able to notice the difference in the species composition. And on my walk today, I noticed that there were quite a few sassafras trees in the understory. And up on top of the mountain, there seemed to be a lot of this fern, which is common bracken. You might also hear it called eagle fern, and here you can see that it really sometimes covers the entire ground. And now that I knew that sheep laurel existed, I started seeing it everywhere, and there were some spots where there was quite a bit of it actually. The trail came out at this power line cut, and up on top of one of the towers I could hear a common raven croaking. And here's the common raven in flight. Notice that huge bill. And it's hard to go off the tail shape from this photo because it looks like it's molting some tail feathers, but very definitely you could identify it just by size and by voice. And here's a photo looking up the power line cut in the other direction. So it looks like they maintain this fairly well. I don't know if they mow it or what the deal is, but it looks like an area that you could walk up, and it might be interesting to see what birds are using that different habitat. But I'll save that adventure for another day, and continued on the trail back into the woods. And you can see now that we're on the Broken Tip Trail, we have blue blazes on the trees. And there continued to be a stunning amount of mountain laurel, all of the white that you can see in this photo. These are all mountain laurel flowers. Here's another tree I was noticing quite a bit of. These are the leaves of the sweet birch, also called the black birch. And here's what the trunk of that sweet birch tree looks like. Here's the leaves of another American chestnut tree, and you can see the flowers of mountain laurel in the background. And more and more and more mountain laurel. This is kind of an interesting spot where you begin to go past some of the big communications towers. And some of them are impressively tall. And at this point, you reach an intersection where you're very close to Skyline Drive. So in my Skyline Drive video, I had a photo of an old house, and I mentioned that there was a spot to jump onto the Broken Tip Trail. So this is where you just have to do a very small connecting trail, would take you right onto Skyline Drive if you wanted to get back on that road, but I continued on the broken tipped loop. I passed some more big towers, and at this point the trail seemed to become a little bit of a service road. You can see the ruts from car tires, so though I don't know if I'd want to be driving my car back there. And we crossed that power line cut again. Looking up here is where we crossed it just a few minutes ago. There's a gravel road that comes up from the power line cut the other direction. Then the trail actually joins that gravel road for a short distance. I had stepped on a few of these and they make a really loud crack when you step on them. So I put it into iNaturalist and it says that it's a larger empty oak apple wasp. And I took a look inside, and my understanding is that this is a gall that is formed by the oak tree, and that there is a single wasp larva here in the center. Here was some sort of hairy scat that had a lot of ants crawling all over it. I could hear a black-billed cuckoo calling, which was nice because mostly I've been hearing yellow-billed cuckoos. And so I tried to sneak up and was looking around, and when I saw it, it was a lot closer than I realized. And these are fairly large birds, so I was able to get some pretty good photos. A bit grainy because of the low light conditions, but my first really good look at black-billed cuckoo this year. And here we have the trunk of an American chestnut tree, and this is by far the largest trunk I've ever seen of one, and the tree was probably somewhere in the ballpark of 35 feet tall. And here we are back at where we started the loop. So straight out in front of us is that old tower trail that we came up, and then off to the right is the direction that we went initially to do the clockwise loop. As I was going down the old tower trail, I came across this interesting oak tree. So I think what's happening here is you have the trunk showing that the tree was leaning, and here this would have been the first branch going off to the right here. And because of the tree leaning, or maybe something happened to the main trunk, this first branch basically became the new trunk. So you have the original trunk leaning, and then this branch going off at a right angle and then growing and becoming the new vertical trunk. Here we have the trunk of another sweet birch tree. And here's the view as we go back down that switchback. And here we are back down at the bottom. This is where we just came out of, and here's Skyline Drive that we need to walk this direction to get back to the car. And the photo doesn't really capture how big this tree was, but this is a pretty big eastern white pine. And here's some more striped maple leaves. And it was interesting because I saw a lot of striped maple along Skyline Drive and on the way up along the old tower trail. But once I got up on top in the highest elevations, I don't remember seeing this tree at all. So next time I go up, I'll have to keep an eye out to see where the cutoff is for the striped maple. And here's the fruit of the striped maple called samara, or as we called them as kids, helicopters. And I got back to the parking lot and my car was stolen. Just kidding, it's actually just here off to the side. But here you can see this sign. If you're ever driving on Route 15, this is the sign you're looking for. It says picnic area, no comfort facilities. So again, this time of year, you mostly are birding by ear. It's really hard to get good photos of birds in the forested areas because it's dark and there's so many leaves. And the birds are mostly hiding and singing. But let's take a look at the eBird checklists to see what I heard and what I saw. I did separate checklists for the different trails. So when I was walking along Skyline Drive on the way in for about 3/4 of a mile, the highlights were 2 Acadian flycatchers. I had blue-headed vireo, heard a raven, and I also had a worm-eating warbler for a total of 14 species. On the old tower trail, I had 13 species, including yellow-billed cuckoo, eastern wood pewee, winter wren. For warblers, I had some ovenbirds, black and white warbler, hooded, chestnut-sided, black-throated blue, and black-throated green, along with some scarlet tanagers. And that trail was about 0.6 miles. And for the broken tip trail loop, eBird ended up calling it about 2.8 miles, which is a little bit longer than what's advertised. Had 23 species, including 3 yellow-billed cuckoos, 1 black-billed cuckoo. From the Hawkwatch Vista, I had a chimney swift along with the 2 great blue herons that flew over. The only woodpeckers I had were 2 hairy woodpeckers. The only flycatchers were 5 eastern wood pewees. Not too many vireos up top, only 2 blue-headed and 8 red-eyed, compared to the huge number of red-eyed we had when we walked the whole length of Skyline Drive. I had a blue jay and a raven, but no crows. 3 black-capped chickadees and a white-breasted nuthatch. Had a random robin. It was kind of in a wooded area, so seemed like a little bit different habitat than where I normally see them. Heard one field sparrow along the power line cut. Had pretty steady number of towhees, 10 for the loop. Same thing with ovenbirds. You'd go a little ways and you'd hear another ovenbird calling. Had a total of 18. Quite a few common warblers. Had 7 black and whites, 6 hoodeds, which I thought it was a pretty good number. 5 Blackburnians, 7 chestnut-sided, 7 black-throated blue, and 1 black-throated green, and also quite a few scarlet tanagers with a total of 7. Well, I really enjoyed hiking the Broken Tip Ski Trail for the first time. I would say the only downside is it ends up being a bit of a long walk since you have to park and walk in along Skyline Drive. If you're going to do the complete loop, you end up having to walk about 5.5 miles or more. So just be aware of that. But otherwise, it's a really nice, quiet location. I didn't see another person the entire time other than one work van came in as I was walking in on Skyline Drive. But I had the trail to myself and good number of birds and just a really fun day learning some new plants and new trees and just a great time of year to get out in nature. So hope you can get out birding soon and explore some new places near your house or farther away. From Lyco Birds, this is David Brown. Thanks for watching.